So think of it as you're playing chess with your co-parent, and they keep kicking the board off. So every time you try to make a move or try to negotiate or try to talk, they just have a temper fit and the chessboard goes up in the air.
You'll get that text, oh, your kids are suffering because of you. You decide to take this divorce. You've broken our family up. This constant just bashing you, putting you down, making you feel like you're not a good parent. And if you don't take the right steps to separate yourself from that situation and set a boundary, it's not going to end. You need to recognize that that marriage is over now, and that relationship and that pattern needs to change. It has to be an internal mind shift, and you have to tell yourself, I do not need to please this person anymore. I need to put myself in the front and my kids. That's my primary focus.
One more example is, you're a joke. No wonder why we divorced, right? And that is just for them to just bait you, right? Welcome to the Just Separated podcast. Hi, I'm Karen Oman, a thanatologist, grief counselor, divorce strategist, and co-author of the Just Separated workbook. I draw on years of personal and professional experience to guide you through the challenges of your divorce. Together, with our expert guests, we'll equip you with the clarity, resilience, and tools to take charge and move forward with confidence. Follow Just Separated and join us as we explore the many different facets of divorce. Welcome to the Just Separated podcast. I'm your host, Karen Oman, and co-founder of Divorce Workshop. Today, we're going to talk about co-parenting with a high conflict ex, and our expert guest is CDC divorce coach, Feryial Parvez. Feryial specializes in helping women navigate the emotional and practical challenges of divorce, offering personalized coaching to empower them to heal, rebuild, and thrive. Her services are designed to meet you where you are and guide you toward reclaiming your independence, confidence, and strength. Divorce is a challenging chapter, but can also be an opportunity for growth and transformation. You can emerge stronger, more confident, and ready to build a fulfilling future. Thank you for coming on the Just Separated podcast.
Thank you for having me today, Karen.
So I think I just want to start off by saying, for many, including myself, co-parenting is a big adjustment period. So yes. I just want to make sure everyone understands that. But when you're divorcing a high conflict personality, it is quite much more challenging. So think of it as you're playing chess with your co-parent, and they keep kicking the board off. So every time you try to make a move or try to negotiate or try to talk, they just have a temper fit and the chessboard goes up in the air. So my first thought is we would discuss, why do we think co-parenting, or what we say too is counter-parenting, can be so much more challenging than regular co-parenting? And so what are your thoughts on that?
So I think the reason why it's so difficult and it's such a different relationship to handle, it's so fragile, is that you are married to this person. It was not a good marriage. And there's a reason you went through with the divorce. You recognize that this was not working for you. It was, a toxic environment for you and your kids, and for the ex-spouse as well. So then what people don't realize is that you develop behavioral patterns to deal with that relationship, because you want to make sure that you don't rock the boat too much, or that there's not conflict and a horrible environment in the home. But that behavioral pattern will not go away if you do not take a step back and reflect and make a mind shift. Okay, we are no longer together now. They don't get to control how I will feel, how I will act. I think that's a key reason, is that people don't give themselves time to heal from that emotional trauma bond. They're stuck in that same emotional pattern of how to deal with their ex-spouse, realizing that, wait a minute, I actually don't have to partake in this now.
Yeah, I also think there's this scared to confront them too. Like, you kind of,
that's true.
Like, you kind of, for me, in my own personal experiences, I walked on eggshells for most of that marriage, and being the people pleaser that I was, after divorce, you finally have the courage to have left, or were left, or, and you're like, okay, my patterns is, of anytime I did try to stick up for myself or do something, I would always get, penalized somehow, however way that your high conflict personality would push you down, right? So there's also that too, that not only the trauma bonding, but also, which is part of the trauma bonding, really, right? When you think about it, it's not just...
Yeah, you're just
Go ahead.
You know, you get stuck in this thing. Like, what happens is they'll either love bomb you, you're like the best person, the best parent ever. Then all of a sudden, maybe they're stressed, something else has happened, but then they take it out on you. You feel bad. And then what do? Because you're a people pleaser, which, you know what the funny thing is? A lot of women are people pleasers, unfortunately. And right away, the first thought is, oh my God, okay, how do I stabilize the situation? Put yourself behind. Your feelings don't matter. How do I make this person happy? And then you might be faced with someone who's going to criticize you or just ignore you. So now you're in this panic mode, like, oh no, what have I done? I need to make them happy again. And you constantly keep doing that. Now that relationship still continues when you start co-parenting, because trust me, and I've seen this with many of my clients, you'll get that text, oh, your kids are suffering because of you. You decide to take this divorce. You've broken our family up. You know, this constant just bashing you, putting you down, making you feel like you're not a good parent. And if you don't take the right steps to separate yourself from that situation and set a boundary, it's not going to end. You need to recognize that that marriage is over now, and that relationship and that pattern needs to change.
Well, isn't that kind of one of the first steps then is to understand one, who you're divorcing? You know, if it's been a toxic marriage or high conflict, domestic violence under the umbrella, right? When we're talking about domestic violence, we're not just talking about physical, we're talking about financial, emotional, sexual, coercive control. So be aware, you know, that probably the patterns of this high conflict person is not going to change. It might even escalate in the co-parenting. And that's one of the tools that most high conflict personalities will use. And that's including men and women, right? So just want to put that out there. So some of the reasons, another is if they weren't able to emotionally regulate when you were married to them, they're definitely not going to emotionally regulate during co-parenting, right? Because
That's so
that's one
true.
of the right. It's one of their control things, right? So they need to control, and so who better to control or try to control is the children, right? And that's what happens in the counter parenting, right?
But also they know exactly what pushes your buttons. They know exactly how to manipulate you and control you. So again, it's so important to, like you said, recognize what that past relationship looked like and how you reacted, and take a step back so that you don't have the same behavioral patterns moving forward as a co-parent. You know, a lot of people ask me, is it even possible to, you know, co-parent with a toxic ex because you have so much history and they know so much about you, like they know exactly, you know, how to get you aggravated and everything. And I tell people, yes, you can. But again, you have to change your mindset, and you need to keep the focus on what's best for your kids and your mental well being.
Yeah, they will try to contradict you all the time throughout the co-parenting or counter-parenting. That's why I said the chessboard, right? They're not going to agree. They're either going to be
Exactly. That's exactly it.
there's two things I think about. They're either going to parent that parenting plan, which we should talk about, should be very detailed with these people, with anybody really. But they're either you're going to follow that parenting plan to a T, or I'm going to get mad, right? Or they're not going to regard the parenting plan at all, right? So they're just going to do what they want
Yeah.
anyways. So there's both that's two scenarios that can happen, right?
That's so true, and that actually is a scenario that we see a lot. It's something very common that comes out into, unfortunately, into play. So, you know, like again, it comes back to, so how do I deal with this? You know, how do I deal with this toxic ex? So I always tell my clients that you need to really set clear boundaries and maintain an arm's length distance. Like you said, you know, you were married to this person, you're not married to them for a reason now. There was a reason you're not with them. So you have to make sure that you keep communication focused only on the kids. You know, use co-parenting apps, text, emails, avoid having a phone conversation or in-person communication. And like you said, it is very important to stick to that parenting plan. I mean, you paid a lot of money to get it, and it's something that legally protects you, right? I always tell people it's your armor, because it's something that's legally binding. And if that person is trying to change the parenting schedule and saying, well, it's not convenient for me, or, you know, you cannot lose the power. Don't let the power of that parenting plan, you know, go away. Always let it, make sure that you're using it properly. And if they really want to change things, you just tell them, okay, if you really need to make this change, we need to go back to our lawyers and we need to get this done, resolved legally. Do not open yourself to the situation where you let them decide what the parenting plan will be. Because I always say, you give an inch, they'll take a foot, right? So again, from this new relationship, you have to really put that clear boundary up that no, this is a plan and this is what we're going to follow. A second tool that I always tell people that is very effective is using the gray rock method. And I know it sounds funny, but it's actually just act like a rock. Like, be uninterested, unemotional. And if they try to provoke you, just respond with short answers like, okay, maybe, let's stick to the schedule. If they criticize you heavily, you can even just say, and I think this works really well, noted, when will you be picking up the kids? Like, just take all the emotion out. And you'll be surprised if you keep doing this, it does have an effect on the other person. They start to realize like, oh, wait a minute, I'm not getting to them the same way. And they might see the situation differently and they'll just stop trying because they know now that, okay, I'm not dealing with the same person that I'm used to. And that's where it comes into like keeping that emotional distance. That's number three, I would say, is like you need to treat your ex like a coworker. It's a business dealing. Like, again, focus on your kids. You don't need to focus on them, and don't let them drag you into old arguments because that's something that happens very often. So keeping emotional distance is also very helpful. Another thing I can't stress enough is document everything. If they send you nasty texts or they're showing that they keep deviating from the parenting plan, you need to keep these conversations and incidents documented because it's going to protect you legally and it can also help provide clarity. I also recommend to a lot of my clients that, a lot of people do use mediators along with their lawyers because we don't want to go to court, obviously. I say retain that mediator because the cost is not the same as retaining a lawyer. So then your ex kind of knows that there's that third party still there. Should you feel uncomfortable and you feel like your ex is trying to, change everything, trying to force you to do things that you're not comfortable with, you call the mediator and bring them into this scenario. So there's a third party to neutralize everything. Um, you have to prioritize your kids' well-being. You have to stay calm and respectful towards each other. Even if your ex doesn't, you need to try to, do that because you're modeling this behavior for your kids and they're learning from you to how to deal with healthy conflict resolution. So it's very important. And the most important thing is, I'm saying everything is important, but all these tools are very important, but you need to take care of yourself. You need to make sure you have the right support system. If you need a divorce coach to guide you and just someone to have by your side at all times, I strongly suggest it, and therapy. It could really be important. And you should also just recognize the small wins. The fact that you didn't react to something is a huge win, and just keep building on that. It really has a great effect at the end of the day.
There's a couple things I want to mention there. So we have to also remember, everybody, that they are not flexible people.
That's true.
They are not going to be that romantic. You hear the stories like, oh, I live with my co-parent just down the street and we have this wonderful, we go on vacation together. We spend Christmases or holidays together. You will not get that. You're not going to get flexibility. You're not going to get that. As much as you're going to try to get that, stop thinking that you're going to get that because it's not going to happen. So we must remember that. And when you talked about support systems, you really need solid support systems, right? Because they are so challenging and they are going to try to poke you as much as they can. They will use what we call FOG, fear, obligation, and guilt. And they will use whatever tactic to try to get some emotional reaction out of you or make you pay. They will try to control everything. And that's just how they're, I said to one client, I said, she was having a problem with, she has one child. And I said, you have to think of them if you look at their brain, they're just not wired like we are. They are not wired. You are never going to rationalize with this person. They're never going to see your way. They're never going to say sorry. And I want to also be honest with you guys is that most of us who have been in this high conflict divorce, co-parenting, you're never going to get justice. You're never going to get that Perry Mason moment with the TV show where you're like, the judge is like, yes, you are the victor. That rarely happens in family court, family law. So just be mindful of that. I don't know if you have any other tips or words of wisdoms about that.
Well, I agree with you 100%. If you're looking for emotional justice from other people, i.e., the court system, the judge, your lawyers, you're not going to get that. You have to internally create a mindset that there was a reason you left this marriage and that you did the right thing. And now your priority is yourself and your kids' well being. That's all that matters. And I agree with you. It's not always easy. It's very easy to sit here as a coach and say, oh, you can do co parenting, but there are situations where it is absolutely very difficult, and that's why you have to make sure you have the right support system, make sure you have a mediator or a lawyer. A lot of people think once a divorce is over, I don't need my lawyer anymore. I always tell people you need to maintain a very good relationship with your lawyer. They know your story, they can guide you really well in terms of what the law is, and like if your ex is crossing the line. And it just comes back to really setting those boundaries and really just keeping that self, arm's length distance. It is so important. You cannot let this person come back into your life, into your private space. It'll just keep that relationship keep going. It'll be that old relationship where you just live separately, but they can still control you. And you don't want that. That's why you left, right? So I think it has to be an internal mind shift. And you have to tell yourself, I do not need to please this person anymore. I need to put myself in the front and my kids. That's my primary focus.
So let's just talk about that a little bit more about boundaries. So we know there's a lot of information out there in the divorce world about make sure you have those boundaries, external boundaries, right? There's lots of people with checklists about boundaries. But when you're dealing with a high conflict personality person, do you think they're honestly going to respect those boundaries that you tell them? They're not going to. If you tell them, um, please don't say this to the kids, do you think they're going to respect that? No, they're going to do it more because that's
It's
kind of.
almost like they get geared up by, oh, please don't do this. Oh, okay. It's like you're almost giving them your weaknesses away and they're going to use every little thing.
So that's why I think it's more better with high conflict personalities to think of, as you've been kind of saying throughout this podcast, is the internal boundaries, right? Like what you can do for yourself to not get engaged with this person. So I actually wrote down some examples so we could kind of get you guys a better idea. So a statement like, you are a terrible parent. The kids are always miserable when they're with you. Okay, that's what your ex says, and that's probably been said many times. So instead, internally, you say, "Those words are meant to provoke me. I don't need that. That I don't need their approval or to defend myself." So we don't need to say anything to that person, or as you said, you can say noted, thank you, right? But internally, you're not going to be attached, like attack, because I'm going to tell you, when I started this, I'm on my 8th year. When he started doing that stuff, I started defending myself, attack, attack. And what happened there? It only escalated, but it also took my legal bills up because I was writing letters. They were writing letters back. And it was like, what's the point? Nothing changed, right? So when I got one letter where it was like, you're this unfit mother, um, I wanted to defend myself because I think I'm a good enough mother, is what we call. And I'm thinking, it was my therapist that said, well, first of all, is there cocaine on the floor? I said, no. Is there booze all over the house? I said, no. Is there food in the fridge? Yes. Are the girls doing good at school? Yes. So how are you unfit? I said, I'm not. Right. So you have to have, we've been talking about, this internal belief
Yeah.
that you're doing the best you can and you are a good parent, right? Instead of having to defend, because one of the things they want is your reaction, right? They thrive on reaction, right? So another example is, you never put the kids first. I have to do everything. That's their statement to you. You say, I'm a loving, responsible parent. Um, that's their version of me, right? So it's kind of like, in a way, until you get used to it, more like affirmations when they attack you, right? So that's my point with internal boundaries. And then one more example is, you're a joke. No wonder why we divorced, right? And that is just for them to just bait you, right? So it's like,
Yes.
I will not engage. So I think that's one of the most important things that I can think of when we're talking about co-parenting, is because they will attack you. They'll say, you
They will.
abandoned me, you're a lousy mother or a father.
You've
And
broken our family. Yeah.
yeah, you abandoned us. That came up with one of my
Mm-hmm.
clients. You abandoned us.
Oh,
No, they didn't abandon the family. They left you, right? Like the high
exactly.
conflict person, right? So I just want to say that there's external, which is the usual checklist of everything, but then there's the internal boundaries. And I think internal boundaries are actually more important than the external boundaries. I don't know your thoughts on that.
I agree 100%. And like I said, you have to change your mindset internally for yourself. And you can only help yourself. And you can only get yourself that emotional justice by recognizing that, yes, I did the right thing for me. I was in a bad situation and I'm going to be a better version of myself now. And I'm going to be a better parent because I'm out of that toxic environment. And I think just letting yourself feel those things and recognizing that can have a huge effect, right? Like just realizing that you have, because there is a lot of guilt. There's a lot of guilt and shame that comes from going through the divorce. It's not easy. You have to restart your life. You have to basically rebrand yourself like you're a new person now, and you have to do everything on your own. And I remind a lot of clients that, you know what, you think you're alone, but you were actually doing the same thing you were because your partner wasn't really involved. You were doing everything. So sometimes people take a step back and they're like, oh yeah, actually I am capable. I have been doing this for so long on my own. And now I can do it with just me being happier and more conscious of what's right for me. Um, so like what we said, like these things are easier than said than done. But I think if it gets to a point where, you know, your kids are young, you do still have to co-parent. I think the other shift you can make is do parallel parenting. And I think that's basically something that really works well because basically you just remove yourself. You're not co-parenting anymore. You take care of the kids how you want when the kids are with you. So you minimize communication, clear boundaries, and stick to the parenting plan. Just keep it very simple. Some examples would be just communicating only through an app like Our Family Wizard. I believe that's available in Canada, US, and the UK. Use neutral drop-offs. Don't go to each other's homes, daycare, school, you know, to avoid any in-person contact. And then just make your day-to-day decisions independently. And I think it just gives you so much more relief. The reality is this person will not disappear. They will be part of your life. But I think it just comes back to like what we're saying is that internally you have to change your thinking and how you see yourself and how you see the other person. And I think that it really is the key at the end of the day.
I think the thing about parallel parenting is, especially for a lot of people that are starting to co-parent, um, it can be useful for a lot of people, especially at the beginning. Now, if they're high conflict, you may be always parallel parenting, but if things are really emotionally triggered at the beginning of a divorce, whether you're high conflict or not, parallel parenting can kind of make it, just start that way and then go into co-parenting once the fire's been a little bit or the emotions been a little bit reduced, right? But parallel parenting is a good one, especially for high conflict. Let's just talk quickly before we wrap up about the effects on high conflict with children, right? Like there's a lot of research with Dr. Ramani that children that deal with high conflict parents, like, and I want to also do the myth. There's a big myth out there when we say high conflict, the assumption of the world assumes that both parents are high conflict, and generally it's not. It's a myth, right? It's not both the father and the mother that are high conflict. Generally there's just one leading the way, and that's a lot of males, and there's some females, right? So
Yes.
so that is also what happens with that is because of that dynamic. Kids with that go through divorces like that can also suffer from quite a lot of anxiety,
Yes.
because they also walked on eggshells. And we know that. We want to talk briefly about that today, is about what some of these people will do, because we know that the family court system, that high conflict is, it's not so much as financial as is custody of the children. And that goes into those terms of parental alienation or abuse by proxy. So some of these high conflict will use these types of, degree of abuse. It's abuse, right?
It
So
is.
I don't know if you've ever run across that at all.
Of course, I mean, this is the first thing that people will do because, you know, the children are the easiest pawns to get to use in this game. Like it goes back to your analogy of chess. It's exactly that. It's easy to pull someone's heartstrings by using the children, and no one wants to see their children harmed. So that's the easiest thing to do, right? Use the kids. Oh, if you don't do this, the kids will suffer. If you don't do this, this is what's going to happen to the kids. You've made the kid's life miserable. This is like the number one thing used in custody battles. And custody battles are known for just dragging the divorce process out even longer. It could drag a very simple divorce to, like, let's say something that would have taken maybe 8 months to like 3 years because there's fighting. And in between all of this fighting, kids are absorbing all of this. They're seeing this. And can you imagine how that's going to be for them when they're older and how they're going to react with high conflict and what is their go-to? So again, it comes back to the point of you always have to remember that your kids are watching you, and you always have to remember that the focus has to be kids, because you can't control that other individual. You were never able to control that narrative, and you won't be able to now. So, I think the biggest thing that we can say is to change your mindset. Be very present with your kids, focus on them, and focus on your well-being. You can't focus on the other being, on the other person.
Yeah, the point of bringing this up, because this is a touchy topic about the alienation abuse by proxy, is just to be aware that this can happen. It doesn't, because in a client situation, they had no idea that this would actually happen. They had a good relationship with their child, and then it happened. And this happened in my own family with my older sister.
Oh,
She didn't talk to my mother for 10 years because my stepmother and my dad. So it can happen. Now, I want also everyone to also note that we need to look at the whole family system. It's not just you can't just the whole family system, right? And conflict loyalty and estrangement. I mean, it's a big topic that we don't have time to talk about today. But I think the point is when you're dealing with a high conflict personality, that for some, they will try to do this. And if you have some awareness of that look for patterns of the kids' behavior, or they're pulling away, or look up Dr. Amy Baker's work if you're feeling a little threatened or a little concerned, because awareness is key in here. It might not happen, right? It probably won't
no.
happen, but just in case you may think or something that this person that you were married to is capable, just have an awareness about that. So
I think that's such an important part, and really very good advice. And I think, again, it comes back to making sure you have the right support system. Make sure you're talking to a therapist. Make sure you have a coach. Make sure you're still have a relationship with your lawyer, because they are the ones who can help you. They can protect you, and it's very important. And unfortunately, we do see this a lot. Parents say nasty things about the other parents, and the kids, they're just kids. They're going to listen to what you're saying, and it's already such a traumatic event that's happening in their life that they'll go to someone, they'll latch on to whatever. And it's sad, and it's a very unhealthy environment for children, unfortunately.
yeah, remember, for a child too, I'm from a divorced family as well. So anytime I would hear something terrible about one of my parents, you're actually attacking me as well, because I'm half that person. So if you're saying my mom is a loser, then you're you're attacking me as well, and I feel like I'm a
Of course.
loser. Now, there's another topic there that we don't have time again to talk about, is do high conflict personality really love their children? Because I just wrote a blog about that, because it does for a child that went through that as an adult now, and then going through that as my own marriage. I often question whether my father actually loved me, and I often question whether my ex really loves his children. Right. So that's a
Yeah.
whole other topic,
That's a
but
whole nother topic. Yeah.
yeah,
But
but
it's
it's,
important that you brought that up, because that's what I'm saying. It has a chain reaction, right?
mhm.
So if we can get the right tools to parent properly, even if the other one isn't, hopefully we can, safeguard our kids from that kind of
Yeah, I think it's pretty
behavior.
research based that if you have one secure, good enough, right? Remember, good enough is the term. It's not
You don't have to
perfect.
be perfect. You don't have to be
No, we
perfect.
are flawed human beings, right? So,
Yes.
but if we're good enough, secure parent, we can be a buffer
Exactly.
to that other high
Exactly.
conflict. So before we wrap up, I usually ask a question for all my guests: is For someone who is just separated, whether they left or were left, what advice would you give them to help them navigate those early days?
Of after divorce,
Right.
or someone who, okay. So if just be true to yourself, don't feel guilt. You didn't do the right thing. You prioritized your happiness, and that's what's important because that allows you to be your best self. And if you're your best self, you can be the best parent, not perfect, but a good parent. So I just want to say, in terms of co-parenting, your parenting plan is your armor, your boundaries are your shield, and your kids are your guiding light. And if you can keep these three things in your little backpack of survival, I think you can. And just reach out for help. Use the support that's out there. Talk to people. It can make a huge difference.
Yeah, like there's resources everywhere, right? Like coaching.
Yeah.
You do coaching, I do coaching. But there's also, my workbook or
A
podcast
workbook is
or
great. Yeah,
YouTube or like get educated, become aware, right? Just like you're saying.
exactly. And the more knowledge you have, the more power you have to make sure that person doesn't get to you.
So how do people get in touch with you and what services you offer?
So you can go onto my website, which is empowertorenew.com. I'm also on LinkedIn under Feryial Parvez. And I basically help individuals through the whole divorce process. So it could be either the initial stages of divorce all the way to the, new chapter of your life, transitioning and recovering. Sometimes people are contemplating, should I get divorced? And what does the divorce even entail? So I can help at that stage, definitely during the divorce process. But what I also feel is that people actually need that extra handholding after they sign those divorce papers, because everyone kind of disappears. And because they think, oh, the papers are signed, your friend group, everyone needs kind of a break at two. It's very emotionally draining. But the professionals are gone, and you're left alone now to co-parent with this person. And you do need somebody to help you. So I actually really feel like people can gain a lot from my services during transition and recovery.
Awesome. Well, it was great to have you on. I hope to have you back on in the fall. And thanks for all the work you're doing.
Thanks, Karen. Thank you so much for having this podcast and giving all this great information to people. Thank you so
You're
much.
welcome. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you for joining today's discussion with our divorce expert. Check out the show notes for more about our guest. If you're finding value in our podcast, follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and our YouTube channel at Divorce Workshop. Share your questions, comments, or guest suggestions. We'd love to hear from you. For a comprehensive divorce guide, check out our Just Separated workbook on Amazon worldwide. This workbook covers everything from emotions and co-parenting to finances, legal insights, and recovery, a must-have for anyone navigating separation or divorce.